to rock and roll, people. It's been a long time. All right, here we are. Well, things I'd like to do before we begin. First of all, I'd like to thank the Piha family for this amazing microphone. It's called a Yeti, and it's apparently very popular amongst podcasters. I hope you can hear me better. Is it clear? Do you hear me clearly? Thumbs up? That's what I need. That's what I need to see. All right, good. So I guess it's working. Um, and so that's thanks to them in memory of Devorah Bat Naomi. Neshama should have an aliyah. Also, I'd like to dedicate this class. There's somebody in our community I just found out is quite ill. I'd like to dedicate this class in honor of Refuah Shalema for Miriam Elisheva Ruth Bat Sarah. Should have a Refuah Shalema Bekarov. And I am super excited about this class. This is a first class in a series. I'd like to see if I can continue throughout the year. It's a book I've been working on for several years now. I'm calling it Taam Dagan. Well, maybe we'll talk about that title some other time. But it's the focus is to find lessons in food and nutrition and halachot regarding food and hashkafot and philosophies about what Jews think about food from the weekly parsha. And it's taken me to all kinds of interesting sources and different places, and I'd like to share some of that with the community finally. I don't think the book is done yet. If I could, if I had more free time to write, it could be done probably pretty quickly. But I don't have as much free time as you might imagine, uh, believe it or not. And so I am. So I've been working on it slowly, slowly, little bit by little bit. And so, uh, with no further ado, I'd like to get started. There's a lot more to say about food in certain parsha than in others, but this week's parsha has quite a few very important lessons. And so let's get right into the source sheet and see what we can see together. Um, this is the link to this Safaria page was sent out in an email. If you did not receive the email, let me know. I'd like to catch you up with that. There are many. This parsha of Eikev is a long parsha, stretches from like chapter 8 through maybe I think 11 of the book of Devarim, and uh, there's like I said, quite a bit to say about this parsha in general, but we're going to focus today on food, for if that's okay with everybody else. All right, so chapter 8, verse 2 says, "V'zacharta et kol haderech asher holichecha Hashem elokecha." Remember the way that Hashem led you in the desert, the big way, I'll call it there, the whole path that Hashem led you on in the desert, in the midbar, not technically a desert, it was a wilderness. Ze Arbaim Shana, all of these 40 years. This is Moshe speaking to the Jewish people. But midbar, in this wilderness, Leman Anotcha, in order to, Anotcha means to make you suffer, to suffer you, to torture you. Hashem put hardships on you through this trek in the midbar. Vina sodcha, and to test you from the word nisayon. Ladat, so you should know, et asher bilvavcha hatishmar mitzvotav imlo. So you would know, and so that he wanted to see what was in your heart, so that you would keep to whether you would keep Hashem's command or not. What does that have to do with eating? So, so the Gemara, the Talmud in Yoma on this verse, Machilcha min hamidbar leman anotcha, that he tested us in this desert, in this wilderness. It says in the Talmud in Yoma 74b, it says Rabbi Ami v'Rabbi Asi Chad Amar Eno Doma Misha Yesh Bo Pat Besalo Lemisha Ein Lo Pat Besalo. The lesson here is that this is a famous phrase, should be a bumper sticker. You can't compare somebody who has bread in his basket to somebody who does not have bread in his basket. In other words, people get hungry. And hunger is a normal, natural, physical occurrence, and that's fine. But did you know that psychologically, you're more hungry if you don't have anything in your basket? As you don't, if you know that when you get home, you haven't eaten, you haven't drunken anything, you're dehydrated, everything else, and you know that when you get home, your refrigerator is empty, that's different. That's a different kind of hunger than if you know that your stock is full, your refrigerator is full of stuff. It's like, so the hunger is at least partially what the Talmud is saying, and this has been vetted since then by psychologists and such, by social scientists. You are hungrier. Hunger is a psychological, also anatomical, but also a physiological, but it's also a psychological phenomenon. We are as hungry as we think we are. And there are people who, that's how certain people have been able to get through, hunger strikes and stuff like that, like Mahatma Gandhi. These kinds of people, what they do is they focus on the fact that they'll eat later. They'll eat later. They kind of push it off. I'm not going to eat right now. Maybe I'll eat in a few minutes or something like that. And that's how, in effect, there is a way to get through hunger, and so that's one important lesson already about food. It's interesting. We're talking about food, and we're starting with hunger. It's perhaps not such a coincidence, but it's important to know that Hashem next day. We only had what we needed for that day. So we were sort of tested. We were like hungrier because we didn't know if we would have food in our refrigerator the next day. It was not a sure thing, at least from our perspective. And then we had to get confidence and believe in Hashem's in Hashem's ability to feed us and take care of us. So that's one important lesson, and that lesson is used by the Ramban in his commentary here about what it means that you have to remember what Hashem did to us in the desert, that He fed us, and He fed us a certain amount every day, so that we wouldn't know, we wouldn't go home knowing I know how much food I have. We would be sort of not confident about how much food we'd have the next day, and that was part of the test. It's also good to mention that there's a reference here. The first word is v'zacharta, and you should remember. So it's kind of an obligation on us, at least according to Sephardic Sidurim. It's an obligation to us every day to remember what Hashem did to us to test us in this desert. There are, according to Ashkenazic Sidurim, there are 6 remembrances. One moment. There are 6 remembrances. And according to Sephardic sources, there are 10. And this is one of the 10, is that we're supposed to remember what Hashem did to us. Now, obviously, it's important to remember things. And it's fascinating, really, that memory is something that the Talmud gives us advice for. Now, keep in mind, this is an important idea. You have to remember that the Talmud gives a lot of medical advice, And we say nowadays we don't follow the Talmud's ideas for nutrition and medicine and things like that because Mishana Habriot, there's a concept that our bodies aren't the same as they were 1500 years ago when this was written down. And so therefore um, it's not as they say, it's not these ideas are no longer recommended, and don't try this at home. But it's worth noting that there might be some science behind this, even nowadays as well. Memory is something many of us are concerned with. We know people who lose their memory as they get older, people who lose their memory even at a younger age. There's all kinds of different forms of dementia and Alzheimer's and things like that everybody is, of course, concerned with. And there are definitely, I would say, exercises and things people can do to try to improve that. Definitely sleep is a proven method. The more sleep a person has, statistically speaking, that seems to help. Also, um, just training your memory. There's people who can remember all kinds of facts. There in the book The Body, a Guide for Occupants by Bill Bryson, he quotes that every year the United States has a national memory championship, and the feats performed there are truly astounding. One memory champion could recall 4,140 random digits after looking at them for just 30 seconds. Another was able to remember 27 randomly shuffled decks of cards in the same time period. Yet another could recall a single deck of cards after 32 seconds of study. It may not be the most worthwhile use of the human mind, but it's certainly a demonstration of its incredible powers and versatility. Most of the memory champions, by the way, are not spectacularly intelligent. They are just motivated enough to train their memories to do more extraordinary tricks. So that's just an interesting thing, and he has more here on different kinds of memory tricks and methods that we could do. The Talmud, however, in Horiot, lists a total of 5 things that help a person remember things, and a lot of them have to do with eating. So I'm going to share some of that with you. So the Talmud says, for instance, eating something. Sorry, the other way around. These 5 things cause a person to lose their memory. So one thing is to eat something on which a mouse or a cat has nibbled. So if you have cats or mice at home, uh, you should probably know whether you do or not, first of all. And maybe memory is important there too. But maybe they don't want you to remember. They don't want you to remember that they're there. But so that's one thing. Eating the heart of an animal is considered bad for memory. Eating olives, according to the Gemara. Now, it happens to be Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky clarifies that, sort of says specifically that we're talking about if that's eaten regularly. It happens to be, by the way, like, as I said before, we have to be careful about these kinds of ideas from the Gemara, because medical science is perhaps advanced, and Mishnah Habriot, and our natures have changed. But it happens to be that these are brought down also as halacha by the Aruch HaShulchan, which is a halachic source from about 100 years ago in Orach Chaim 2.5. Let's get to that source real quick. Right, so that's the Gemara in Horiot that begins, and there's the Aruch HaShulchan here, quoting this as well. An animal's heart, eating olives, and again regularly eating olives, drinking excess water from the washing. In other words, or washing his legs one on top of the other. There's all kinds of other things as well. 5 things that can help boost memory is eating toasted bread, all the more so the burnt parts themselves. So although that might be considered a carcinogen, it's anyway, you have to balance whether your desires. So that's that. Burnt roasted egg without salt. Somebody who eats olive oil or accustoms himself with wine and spices. drinks excess water from dough. These are all, so if you're making dough and you have the extra water left over, so drinking that water is apparently good for memory. So is dipping your finger in salt and eating that salt also seems to be a trick of memory. I always thought that was just like people just like I don't know, sort of fidgeting during a speech. But I've seen, during speeches when there's a great rabbi speaking at a dais and there's other rabbis sitting there. I see them very often, sort of like picking at the crumbs at their plate and like putting it in their mouths. So it might be that that there's something to that improves their memory because they are great rabbis, obviously. If for no other reason than because they have a great ability to remember facts and opinions and such. So that's it happens to be another Gemara, Menachot 85b, talks also about olive oil, and over there it says people who eat olive oil, they are those places where they eat olive oil, they're more intelligent. It's important to know that. Like I said before, it's not. This is not. Don't go and start doing this just because you know that it says to do it in the Gemara to improve your memory. You definitely check with your doctor before you do this. Everything in good measure, as they say, is definitely healthier than just doing everything you see. Now. Let's get back to the Parsha. Huh. That was weird. What happened here? One moment. Oh, okay. Okay. Scrolling. One moment. Bless you. Okay. 8:3. Okay. So again, Moshe is telling the Jewish people to remember all these things that have happened. In chapter 8, sorry. I don't know what's happening here. I have the wrong sources. Everything's kind of mixed up. Okay, you know what? Let me share. Let me share my document. Instead of the source sheet, I'll share my actual manuscript. It also has pretty much all the same information. It's a little bit more spelled out. Okay, we're in chapter 8, verse 3. Let me blow that up a bit so it's easier for you to see on the screen. V'yancha, v'yarivcha, v'yachilcha et haman. Hashem troubled you and made you hungry and fed you the man that you did not know. Asher lo yadata, v'lo yadun avotecha, that your fathers didn't know. Man is a brand new thing, manna, right? Laman hudiacha, so that you would know, kilo ahalechem levado yichya ha'adam, that man does not live by bread alone. Ki al kol motze pi Hashem yichya ha'adam. Hashem, people live through what Hashem says. That's the first half of that phrase is pretty well known. Man does not live by bread alone. But what does the rest of that mean? That we live by what Hashem says. So first, I want to quote again. We're going to quote Bill Bryson from his book At Home. It says, "Making food out of plants is hard work. The conversion of wheat, rice, corn, millet, barley, and other grasses into staple foodstuffs is one of the great achievements of human history, but also one of the more unexpected ones. You have only to consider the lawn outside your window to realize that grass in its natural state is not an obvious foodstuff for non-ruminants such as ourselves. For us, making grass edible is a challenge that can be solved only with a lot of careful manipulation and protracted ingenuity. Take wheat. Wheat is useless as a food until made into something much more complex and ambitious like bread, and that takes a great deal of effort. Somebody must first separate out the grain and grind it into meal, then convert the meal into flour, then mix that with other components like yeast and salt to make dough. Then the dough must be kneaded to a particular consistency, and finally the resulting lump must be baked with precision and care. The scope for failure in the last step alone is so great that in every society in which bread has featured, baking has been turned over to professionals from the earliest stages. Based on that idea, Rav Hirsch, who didn't read Bill Bryson, of course, he's 100 years earlier, or more, 150 years earlier, so writes this. Writes, bread represents a partnership between a person and Hashem. Bread is the food that man wrests from nature. Wrests from nature. Sorry. It's in competition with his fellow men. Bread is the joint product of nature and of intelligence with which man masters the world. Thus, bread represents the intelligence by which man, through social cooperation, produces the means of his existence. But it would be erroneous to believe that this creative human power is the sole requirement for man's existence on earth. The prime factor in man's sustenance is God's providence. His generous care is evident in every morsel of bread with which we sustain yet another moment of our existence. Sorry. To forget this would mean to fall prey to a most dangerous delusion on which our devotion to duty would founder. The concern to provide for one's wife and children is in itself such a legitimate motive for our activities that it could easily cause us to lose sight of all considerations once we persuade ourselves that we and only we ourselves can provide our own sustenance and that of our dependents. We would then persuade ourselves that any gain wrested from nature and from our fellow men will assure our sustenance and that of our dependents, regardless of the means we employ for this purpose. If this is our attitude, then we will not care whether, in so doing, we observe God's commands, earning our daily bread only by means within the limits shown us by God, or whether we obtain our sustenance by skillful manipulation without considering whether God would approve of our methods. So in other words, we are our partnership with Hashem stems from our bread. As we work, and it's hard work to make bread, literally bread, as we just saw, but also our sustenance, which bread represents. Like that's why there's a saying, bringing he brings in the dough or whatever, right? He makes a lot of bread, right? That we're not talking about. We're not talking about challah. We're talking about that's a person's parnasa. So how much how much is in our ability to sustain our families. So that is not our job alone. We are partners with Hashem. Hashem gives us the wherewithal to do these things. And if we forget that, we might also forget. That's what not by bread alone does man live. Man lives by Hashem's word. We, in other words, listen to what Hashem says and earn bread the way He says, not playing tricks, not breaking laws or anything like that. That's an important symbol of what. That's an important idea of what bread symbolizes in our lives. And that's one of the reasons why there's such a long blessing after we eat bread. Why we make a whole ceremony out of eating bread is because bread really represents quite a bit of our ability, and the fact that we lessen our own ability and thank Hashem for what He provides in all of this. An important idea. The next thing is a sort of short idea, but also worth noting. Chapter 8, verse 5 says, "V'yidata im levavcha," you should know in your heart, Ki kash, chapter 5, I said chapter 8, verse 5, in case I didn't say it already. Ki kasher yisar ish et beno, because just as a man punishes his son, Hashem elokecha miyasreka. Hashem also punishes you. And this is all again in regard to the fact that the Jewish people were testing Hashem, and as the I think it's the yeah, and the Ramban says part of Hashem's testing the Jews was depriving them in the desert. They did not have as much as we have nowadays, right? Okay, yes, they had it easier, no question, right? They didn't get sunburns and they didn't have to buy new shoes or anything like that. Just one moment, please. Okay, back here. Okay, sorry about that. So it's we have to appreciate the fact that Hashem sort of challenges us in this way, and that He gave us food in order so that we would appreciate and enjoy the food of Eretz Israel all the more when we get there, right? When we're eating the holy food and when we're working on it in a holy way, and when we're working the holy land in a holy way, and we're doing it the way Hashem said, then we'll get the food that Hashem said we'll get, and then we can be more grateful. There's more on this subject in the coming phrases as well. One second. Chapter 8, verse 8 says, one moment. Much better. Chapter 8, verse 8 says, Eretz chita seora gefen v'ta'ena v'rimon, eretz zeit shemen udvash. This is the verse from which we learn what the seven fruits of Israel are. They are wheat and barley, vines, otherwise known as what we call grapes, right? Grapes grow in grapevines, fig trees and pomegranates, a land of olive trees and honey. You know, I'm even going to translate. I'm going to change the translation from vines to grapes. Just keep it simple, right? And the commentaries explain that the good quality of Eretz Yisrael's land is exemplified in its containing the staples, but not just the staples, because you don't need all of these fruit, although you do need fruit. You need fructose and different vitamins and such that these provide, as we'll talk about quite soon. But so we also get luxury foods, says the Sforno. Maybe I can switch here to the source sheet, which I think I still have in Safari for you to read along to. That would be this one. Okay, and don't know why I lost much of my sources. I had a lot more sources here earlier today. Okay. Yeah, so here we go. Right? So these Forno writes that, and he actually writes this earlier, but his comment here actually extends to a few verses down as well. So he points out that this Eretz Chita Seora is a reference to the basics, what we need. There's wheat, right? The grains, right? Those are staples, as we call it. But the other foods, the rimon, the pomegranate, yes, it's good for your heart. But can you live your life without ever eating a pomegranate? Sure. I mean, you could probably live your life without eating bread also, but it would be quite unhealthy not eating the staples. But certainly these can be considered sort of luxury items. That's why we sort of make a big deal about them when we eat them, right? We say a shechianu perhaps if we haven't had them in a year or a long time, like that. Um, okay, so let's go on. Let's see what else. What else can I share here? Um, the Rav Hirsch there also says that besides containing the essentials, the land of Israel also has delicacies, as the Sforno says. But why? To heighten the joy of life. To heighten the joy of life. Well, Hashem wants us to enjoy the world. He gives us things, He gives us foods that not only are good for our health, but that we enjoy tasting. We enjoy eating them. They taste good. Yeah, we like them. They put a smile on our face. They give us a reason to live. You know, there's foods that excite us and make us make us want to do things. It's food can be a very powerful motivator, not just for us, it's for everybody. Now, there's also this verse is a very important verse for halachic reasons because the Shulchan Aruch and Orach Chaim says that whichever species is mentioned first in the verse has priority in the blessing. The second mention of the land in that verse creates a break from the first mention. The species that is closest following it has priority over those species mentioned later after the first mention of the land. What this means is, you go back to the verse, and you'll see there that the verse says Eretz, or land, Chita Seora Vagefen Te'ena Verimon, and it says Eretz, which is land again, Zayit Shemen Udvash. So if you have all of these foods given to you at the same time, which one should you make a blessing on first? So the answer is you go with whichever word is closest to following the word Eretz. So so wheat comes first. If you have, in other words, if you're given a piece of bread and you're given a grape, what should your blessing be? Should you say hamotzi on the bread, or should you say hagafen or sorry ha'etz on the grape? The answer is hamotzi on the bread first. That's the priority. All things being equal, by the way, right? There are other halakhic considerations, like whether you have water to wash with, whether you want to have the bread, whether you have to have it, whether you've already eaten bread. There are obviously other considerations to consider. So this is not a class for halacha, but I'm just bringing it up that it's in the verse. There's a reason why it says Eretz the way that it does, according to the Talmud, in Brachot, where this is quoted. Right. So and also in the Shulchan Aruch that brings it down. Thus, says the Shulchan Aruch, dates have a priority over grapes for the blessing, since they are the second species mentioned after the first mention of the land. Right? Whereas grapes are the third mentioned species after the first mention of the land. So that's how it goes. The first time it says Eretz, and then whichever fruit are named after it, that has priority over the next time that the fruits are mentioned. So if you have a pomegranate and a date, which blessing should you say first? Dates come first, like that. Again, all things being equal, if you really, really don't like pomegranates, sorry, if you don't like dates at all, you're just kind of eating it because you're forced to, as opposed to pomegranates, which you like more. So there could be reason to perhaps say that you should say the blessing on the pomegranate first. All right, that's again. Well, I don't want to get too far into halacha. We only have 20 minutes left, and we haven't gotten to. Well, we've gotten to some important things, but we haven't gotten to one of the key verses that has to do with food in the entire Torah in this week's verse, in this week's Parsha. Okay, so chapter 8, verse 9 says, Eretz asher lo b'miskenut tochal bo lechem lo techzar kol ba Eretz asher avanecha barza u'meharecha tachtzov nechoshet. So the Hashem, Moshe is promising us that we are going to go to a land, and there's Israel, where you can eat food without missing anything, where you will lack nothing, a land whose rocks are iron and from whose hills you can mine copper. Why in the world do I need to know about this mining of copper and everything else? So first of all, It's interesting that in the Talmud's hierarchy of needs, having food but no money is less comforting than having money without available food. So if you have money and you don't have food, you're not so worried because you have money. So you'll worst case scenario, you'll order out. You'll get it. But if you come home to an empty house, money wise, all you have is the food in the fridge. You have no money to pay the bills. So that's more of a stressor. And that's why this verse stresses that bread will be inexpensive in Eretz Israel, according to Sforno. Now, what about the iron and the copper? What's going on there? So it's important to know. And here I'm going to quote again from Bill Bryson's The Body book. It says vitamins are simply organic chemicals. That is from things that are or were once alive, like plants and animals, while minerals are inorganic and come from soil or water. So the metals are a symbol of minerals. Altogether, there are about 40 of these little particles that we must get from our foods because we cannot manufacture them for ourselves. There are more than 40 minerals and vitamins that we need on a almost daily basis for our body to function that we can't get from ourselves, that we don't manufacture. Our cells don't make these things. That has to come from outside. That has to come from our food. Eretz Yisrael will be such a place where we'll have all of the minerals, all the vitamins and minerals all in one place. We don't need to send out for it. We don't need to export it. We don't need to get, we don't need to import it from elsewhere. We don't need to order it from the restaurant. It'll all be there. Is the point? And the next verse, chapter 8, verse 10, says, and here's the verse that's probably one of the key verses of regarding food in all of the Torah. And we've spoken about this verse in previous classes, and we mention it in the Birkat Hamazon, because the mitzvah to say Birkat Hamazon, to thank Hashem for our food after we eat it, comes from this verse. Because the verse says, chapter 8, verse 10, V'achalta v'savata uve'rachta et Hashem Elokecha al ha'aretz hatova asher natan lach. You shall eat, and you shall be satisfied, and you shall bless Hashem, your God, over the land, before the good land that He has given you. So this is the verse. You've eaten, and you were satisfied. And even if you're not totally satisfied, you know, it's stuffed to the gills, but you've eaten what you needed to eat, even a minimum amount of the food you needed to eat. At that point, you say a blessing. So the Talmud says in Brachot, Menayin Birkat Hamazon Lacharecha min Torah Shenamar V'Achalta V'Savata Uvirachta. How do you know that you have to say a blessing after food? The Gemara in Brachot 21a tells us it's from this verse: eat and be satisfied and bless. The Meshech Chochmah has a problem that I haven't even brought up yet. The problem has to do with the blessing before food. Because as we just suggested, the blessing for after food is from this verse. But where do you see in the Torah that you have to make a blessing before food? So the Talmud originally suggests a kal vachomer, which is in Latin is called an foriorti. I'm saying it all wrong. I'm not Latin, believe it or not. I'm not Roman. It's a kind of argument, which is if this lenient thing, then all the more so this big thing. So in other words, the argument is, if you thank Hashem once your belly is full, then all the more so you should speak to Hashem when your belly is empty, right? You obviously you're thankful. You should be thankful for the food after you've eaten it. So by the way, you look around culturally, and many cultures have a blessing before food, saying grace or thanking God or yabba dub dub, thanks for the grub, something, right? But to say thank you after the food is not in most religions. It's not in most cultures. It happens to be we're learning that that's actually the primary, the big blessing that the Torah talks about is the after blessing. How do you know that you should make a blessing before? So for originally, it's the Talmud says that it's from a kal v'chomer, from this logical inference, and then it says no, that doesn't work. It doesn't tell us really why. So the Meshech Chochma, right? Meshech Chochma writes that it has a lot to do with why we're saying the blessing. If you think that you're saying the blessing of Birkat Hamazon as thanks to Hashem for giving you food, so then you'd be right. And then there is obviously that logical thing that if you're thanking Hashem for food afterwards, then all the more so you should thank Him before you eat. But there's more to it, says the Meshech Chochma. That's not why we say a blessing for food. It's not because of our thankfulness. It's not a matter of gratitude. He writes, "V'tama nira di'im naina al hatashlum al gemul hatov shegamal lo hakadosh baruch hu az hu kal v'chomer maleh." It would have been a good logical argument, but that's not the case. It says, "Ach be'emet ein habracha al ze bilvad." That's not what the blessing is for. Why? Once you eat and once you're satisfied, ashu al lebait. At that point, you're full, and you think to yourself, "I'm indestructible. I'm great. Everything is wonderful about me." There's this what they didn't know when the Meshech Chochma was writing is that there's all these hormones kicking in, and this is at that point after you've satisfied yourself, you've got all this positive energy and all this not gratitude, but like sort of self what's the word I'm looking for? You think you're the greatest thing since sliced bread, even if you didn't eat sliced bread. You're totally the best. Everything's great. I did this myself. I made this food myself. I ate this food myself. Nobody did anything for me. I don't need anybody else. I'm totally self-sufficient. That's the word I'm looking for. You feel self-sufficient after you've eaten. You don't need anything. We say Birkat Hamazon, says the Meshech Chochma, to fight against that, to remember that we still need something. Never mind, you do need something because just because you have food in your belly doesn't mean it's actually going to come out in the right way. Doesn't mean your digestive juices are going to work. Doesn't mean your intestines and everything else are going to do what they're supposed to do. All of that is a miracle, and the whole digestive system is miraculous and amazing. And we have to thank Hashem for that as well. And we do when we say another blessing called Asher Yatzar. It's not the time for that. But the point is that after you've eaten your food, at that point, when you're feeling like you don't need Hashem for anything because you've got what you wanted, right? Your part of the deal is done. It's like that famous joke that I remember Rabbi Hollander likes to say. The guy looking for a parking spot. So he's driving, he's looking for a parking spot, and he's getting late, and there's nowhere to park. He says, "Please God, if you show me a parking spot, then I'll do this and I'll do that. I'll keep Shabbat and I'll eat kosher and I'll go to Torah classes and I'll do everything you say, God. It'll be great." And all of a sudden, out of the blue, a light comes like the sun starts shining through the clouds directly onto this beautiful spot right by the door of the building he needs to get to. And there's a beautiful spot, fits his car perfectly. The guy looks up and says, "Never mind, God, I found it. Right? I got this." Right? So once you have what you think you wanted, You feel like you don't need God anymore. That's what Birkat Hamazon is for. It's to fight against that. That whole general outlook on life is very dangerous. We talked about that already from our Hirsch. But that's what the Meshech Chochmah writes here, that that's the reason, and that's why the Kal V'chomer falls apart. That's why you can't learn that from this Kal V'chomer. Okay. I have here quoted the Shulchan Aruch. Um, right. Um, so one is considered satisfied after eating a kazayit or an olive's volume of bread. That's what it means visavata. Since foods that don't have that same size requirements don't combine, halacha says that if you were to eat a vegetable soup, the solid food and the liquid in it do not combine to require an after blessing. There's sometimes that you eat a food, even if you ate a lot of it, you might not have to make an after blessing because the liquid in the soup doesn't count. And if you have very few vegetables, if you don't have an olive's volume of vegetables, and if you don't eat it within a certain time, also, by the way, kedei achilat pras, as the phrase is, you have to eat basically within about 3 minutes. They have to eat an olive's volume of 1.1 ounces of the solids. Then only then would you make an after blessing. By the way, this goes for bread as well. And then the Bach in Shulchan Aruch points out that the reason for coming to Eretz Yisrael is not to eat these good fruits and good foods. That's not. Why do we want to go to Israel? To eat good food, yay! All these good restaurants and everything. No, that's not the operative philosophy that we're supposed to have. This verse is a source of the language used in the Al Hamichya blessing because there is kedusha, there's holiness in the fruits that we eat. And if we eat them, l'shem shemayim for the sake of heaven, is what the Bach writes. Completely different topic. We have two more verses. I'm going to try to squeeze in here. A completely different topic is in chapter 10, verse 12. And it says there, famous idea of Ve'ata, and now Yisrael ma Hashem Elokecha shol me'imach. What does Hashem want from you? Ki im liyirat Hashem Elokecha, just to fear Him. That's all He wants. Fear of Hashem. Which is by the way, one of the hardest mitzvot to do. By the way, right? The Gemara says just fear of Hashem. That's one of the hardest mitzvot to do, says the Talmud. For Moshe, it was an easy one. So that's why he's mentioning it, right? So, l'lechet b'chol derachav, to go in his ways, le'ava uto, la'avod et Hashem elokecha, to walk in his ways, to love and to serve Hashem, b'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha, with all your heart and with all your soul. That's what Hashem wants. This verse happens to be, there's not much really to say about this. We have an idea that comes from the Talmud in Menachot 43b. It says there, Tanya Haya Rabbi Meir Omer Chayev Adam Levarech Mea Brachot B'Kol Yom. Everybody is obligated to make 100 blessings every day. Every day you're supposed to make 100 blessings. It's easy on a weekday, by the way. If you're praying Shemona Esrei 3 times, that's 19 blessings. 19 times 3, that's already close to 60, right? 57 to be exact. And then you're going to the bathroom a couple of times or several times a day. You're eating, you're drinking. Yeah, there's another 18 blessings that you say every morning. It's pretty easy during the weekday to get to that blessing, to get to that number of 100 blessings. It's much harder on Shabbat, which is why we try to find, extra, eat an extra fruit here and there, whatever. We have more bracha. We have the Haftorah. One moment. Okay. And all of this comes from the word ma. What does Hashem want for you? Ma. What? What does Hashem want from him? So ma could be also read as mea. Mea is the Hebrew word for 100. Hashem wants you to say 100 blessings every single day, and that's where food comes in, because one of the easy ways to get these 100 blessings is to eat. When we eat before food, we make a blessing. After food, we make a blessing. Of course, under those conditions that we said before, you've eaten 1.1 ounces of solid food within 3 minutes. You've drunken a cheekful of 3 cheekfuls of liquid within 30 seconds, whatever it is. So there are ways to make an after blessing. You don't have to. By the way, a misnomer like you've never seen before, very common misconception is that people think you cannot make a blessing unless you are sure you're going to make an after blessing. That's not true. You can and sometimes should only make the blessing for food and not for the drink. Most common example of this is coffee. Most people drink coffee hot. There is no way to drink your coffee as fast as Chazal want you to drink it in order to make an after blessing. So you don't make an after blessing. You can be sipping on your coffee all day long, or drinking water. Also a great example. You don't make an after blessing on water. There's nothing wrong with not making an after blessing if you don't have to. If you do have to, obviously there's a problem if you didn't. So that's a different story. All right, last verse that we're going to cover for today, and I apologize if we go a little bit over time, but this is also a significant rule worth knowing. Oh boy, how'd that happen? So funny. It's funny when you make funny mistakes. Okay, okay, here we go. Chapter 11, verse 15. This is already all the way at the end of the Parsha. It says, "V'natati Eikev b'sarcha livimtecha v'achalta v'savata." This is a verse from the second paragraph of Shema, which is in this week's Parsha. And it says, Hashem is going to give you your grass in the fields for livimtecha, for your animals, v'achalta v'savata, and you're going to eat and you will be satisfied. You will eat and be satisfied. Should probably come first, don't you think? Who's the priority here, me or my animals? So because of that, the Gemara in Brachot points out, here towards the end of this quote here, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav, Asur le'adam sheyochal kodem she'iten ma'achal lebehemto. A person should not eat until he feeds his own animal first. Shenamar, as it says, this verse, Natati Eikev b'sarcha livimtecha v'hadar v'achalta v'savata. You can't eat and be satisfied until first you feed your animals. That's the first thing you have to do. The fact that the verse mentions Hashem is providing food for animals before mentioning his providing for people's needs points to the importance of a person feeding one's animals before eating. The prohibition against eating before one's animal might be because of the animal's pain, even though their hunger is not the fault of the owner, says the Yavitz. The verse implies that we will be satisfied by the basics as well as luxury foods like meat and milk. Most monetary sins occur when one is seeking luxury items like fancy foods. That meat is a luxury, not essential. It's clear from the fact that one must only eat it if one can afford it, according to the halacha. One should avoid becoming accustomed to eating rich foods, and there's a source for that. But I also wanted to tell you a story here of Yaakov Galinsky. Says that he tells a story about how Rabbi Avraham Yafen, the Rosh Yeshiva of Novardok in Bialystok, and the son-in-law of the Alter of Novardok, visited Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Galinsky hosted him in his house. It was a great honor, and on Motzi Shabbat, he said to him, "Let's go see the Stipler." The Stipler, going by the way, whose yahrzeit is tonight, had been his Talmud in Bialystok. The Stipler is also the father of Rav Chaim Kanievsky, who we quoted earlier. Um, we went and found him in the middle of eating his malava malka, which is the meal after Shabbat, which consisted of some leftover challah and the tail of some salty fish and a glass of water. Rav Avram exclaimed, "He hasn't changed in 30 years. This attitude is a blessing, as it is written, Uva'u alecha kol habrachot ha'ela v'hisigucha. All these blessings will come upon you and overtake you." What does the Torah mean by v'hisigucha and the blessings will overtake you? Are we trying to run away from them? Usually, when a person is blessed, it means that he experiences an improvement in his lifestyle. He moves to a nicer house, gets a more expensive car, he has more blessings, and now you have to call information to find his new address. Now you're not good enough for him anymore. You knock on his front door, the butler peeps through the eye hole to see who it is. He doesn't recognize you and tells you through the intercom that your friend isn't at home. This is not the way to act. When you receive blessings, they should overtake you as you were before, and your newfound prosperity should not cause you to change for the bad. Like Avraham Avinu, who didn't change his lodgings, even though he could afford better now. He also says he was once visiting the Stipler Gaon, again, whose yard site is tonight, and his granddaughter entered the room and held up a piece of gum. Zaidi, she said, grandfather, is it kosher? The Stipler looked at me and said, this generation, they don't ask if it's good to eat, if it's healthy. It's not even a question. The only thing holding them back is the hechsher, the kosher certification. So that's the Gemara states in Ketubot 67b a story about a man who once came to Rabbi Nehemiah to seek financial assistance, and the Rabbi Nehemiah asked, "What do you have? What's your meal like? What do you eat?" And the man said, "Fatty meat and old wine." Rabbi Nehemiah asked them, "Would you consent to live on lentils like I do?" And the man agreed. He began to live on lentils and died. Oy vey, Rabbi Nehemiah said, for this man whom Rabbi Nehemiah killed. I killed this man. I told him to eat lentils. That was bad for his diet. That was not enough for him. It might be enough for me, but it's not enough for him. So the Gemara comments, on the contrary, he should have said, Oy vey for Rabbi Nehemiah who killed this man. The Gemara answers that it was the man who was to blame for cultivating a rich lifestyle until he died when he was deprived of it. So again, the idea is we have to be careful what we eat. We'll see that as a common theme throughout this class. We're going to see lots of examples of things that we should and shouldn't eat. God willing, in the course of this class, hopefully we'll be able to eat a healthier life and live a long, healthy life of serving Hashem as the Stipler did, and God willing, as Miriam Elisheva Ruth Bat Sarah will do as well. All right. Thank you for listening, and I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.